get started. Today on Ministry Monday, I'm sitting with Lorraine and Meredith. Hey, ladies, how are you?
How are you? Good.
Hey, hi, Amanda.
I am so happy to talk to you today because, of course, we are filming our Mother's Day episode. I had hoped to speak with you after I watched your presentation last year, Balancing Music Ministry and Motherhood. It was so good. It was one of our top rated breakouts from last year.
No kidding.
Yeah, seriously.
Awesome.
And of course, it was so well received that you're doing a part 2 this year, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But, you know, if someone's listening to the podcast and maybe they might not even be a member of NPM, would you mind giving a little bit of introduction for those who are listening?
Well, I love this collaboration between Meredith and me because we have children of different ages, like she's in the middle school, high school, and I'm in the high school, college, but we've all been both of us have been doing this since our children were babies. And before that, right, Meredith? I mean, pregnant and, before children.
Yeah.
And so we kind of had an experience of how to balance all of this through all stages of children. My oldest is going to be 28 this year even. So, I mean, like even, post all that. So we had some good material and the good, the bad, the ugly, and some mistakes that we've made and some success moments. And I think that's why this worked, is because it was really a real presentation that was practical, and people were able to latch on to it.
Just picking up off of what Lorraine said, I think it was also interesting for me. I can't speak for you, but for me anyway, to think about it as a whole, because we're always on automatic pilot doing it. I have been since they were in utero. So that's what I've been doing. So to think about it as a whole and to put it on paper and then to try to communicate it and pull our ideas together that might resonate with other women was fun. It was also interesting.
We're going to dig deeper a little bit into that too, for those who may not have attended the virtual convention last year or who just haven't watched the breakout since then. But before we do, it's been really enjoyable, or I should say beneficial to the listeners, to hear both of your situations right now, both geographically and in light of COVID, and how you're ministering. So do you mind, we'll start with Meredith, how have you been ministering where you are lately, and where are you?
I am in New York City. As we speak, I'm on 31st Street between 6th and 7th Avenue. So for those of you who are familiar with New York City, right outside of Penn Station, basically, Madison Square Garden. So, I think everybody knows that we were kind of the epicenter for a long while. So it's really been kind of exciting to come to work, because I never stopped working throughout the whole thing, because we switched right into live stream and just, we had to keep ministering to our people. So that meant that we needed to come here, because you can't really do music. Well, I guess you could, but it was important to be here. So I never stopped working, and commuting a year ago was kind of scary at times because the streets were completely empty. I mean, imagine 7th Avenue in New York City not having any cars. I mean, I posted that on social media a couple of times. But it's picked back up immensely. And we opened the church back up in July. So it was from March to July, and at 25%. So we can seat about 140 people. And now some Sundays we're at quota. We can't get any more people in. So it's really, it's great to see people. I think the vaccination has helped immensely to bring people back. And, our state government has been really strict with numbers. So if it's above us, like 3-point-something%, then, where other states might be 14%, and then we're going to go on lockdown, we're like at 5%, we go on lockdown. So it's been, I think, the way they've handled it has been helpful. So we're moving right along.
What about you, Lorraine? I know that right at the time of us recording this, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but pretty sure your diocese just announced that the obligation will be lifted soon. Is that correct?
That is correct. So in June, I believe, is going there. There's no more dispensation for.
Yeah, right.
But our parish is going to continue the live stream because it's really been evangelical. We've had a lot of people who have come back to church because of what they've seen on the live stream. And, people like mom's watching, and then someone happens to be in the room and they sit down and they listen to the homily, and then they say, well, maybe I'll go back. Maybe I do want to go back. So, and then for the weddings and for the people who are not comfortable coming back to church, we still want to have that available to them. But like my pastor says, if you're going to the mall and you're going to restaurants, you can come back to church. And so, so we are, of course, we're in a warmer climate, and my parish is just on the outside of New Orleans. So we're, 10 minutes from the French Quarter, but we're not considered in New Orleans. And so our restrictions are not quite as strict as inside the city itself. So we all still wear masks, but we don't have a number restriction, and our churches are very full. I would not say to capacity, but a lot of people have come back, and our goal has kind of been to keep the church open and keep the school open, and anything that threatens that, we're not going to do. Anything that's unsafe that would threaten keeping the church and the school open, we're not going to do. And it's been very successful for us. So we had 22 people welcomed into the church at the Easter Vigil, which is kind of a testament to the priorities that we have for, doing things for marriage ministry, doing things for mental health, making sure that we're safe, but that there's still that spirituality that people are longing for right now. So our first, I guess, public mass was Mother's Day last year. We did it on the school parking lot, and we put a parking cone, 20 yards apart from and each little family cluster could sit at a parking cone. And it was and the priest went to everyone and brought them communion, which was so powerful. He was feeding the flock, and it was just not a dry eye, I would say, in the house, but we weren't in the house, we were outside. It was beautiful. But it was beautiful. And we've done some things since then to add that are, strictly the focus on the mental health, marriages, and keeping the school and the church open.
I keep thinking about what you said about not a dry eye in the lot. I think that I think I'll always look back at this time and just remember the many parking lots that were used in a very unique way during this time. It was such a creative way for ministry. I mean, we had to be, of course.
Yes.
But I think that's a good way to transition into the conversation to kind of touch base on what you talked about last year. Of course, so balancing music ministry and motherhood takes a great deal of creativity. And one of the things that you spoke about was creativity, as well as establishing boundaries and prioritizing. Those were some of my main takeaways. As we look into this crazy COVID world, I don't know if if your children's education changed, if they went in person, if they were virtual. I mean, how has your balancing music ministry and motherhood looked like this year? Meredith, I think you want to start.
Well, I'm really grateful that I don't have little kids, because that would have been more difficult than it is with two teenagers. But they were home, and then when the school year started this year, you could decide if you wanted them to go in person or to stay virtual. And the in person was, you could pick the morning or the afternoon. And so we decided that we wanted them to go in the morning, and because it was important to kind of get out and establish some routine rather than just being in the house. And it's worked out really well for them. Their school is hyper vigilant. Like they get tested randomly every day. Kids are tested. So, but because my kids are a little bit older, when they were home, if they were just doing like the morning, even if they had to go virtual, it would still be morning. So I was able to sort of monitor what was happening. And thank goodness for FaceTime and things like that, because I still monitor if I'm not there.
So my son has been, they started hybrid in the beginning of the school year. He's a junior in high school. This is my caboose. And they did a hybrid A through L, M through Z, and they went every other day, and then they were home. And so they just kept almost like team A, team B, and they kept them separated, kind of similar to what Meredith's talking about. And they canceled all of the social activities that would have been a high risk for the kids. And then in October, they all went back full time, but they still kept distance, and they kept, contact tracing. Kids would have to stay home for 2 weeks. And there was, my husband and I both had COVID around Thanksgiving. And so, my son stayed home during his quarantine time. It's a miracle he did not. I don't know how he did get it, but he didn't. And so the outdoor sports have been a little easier than the indoor sports. The basketball team had a little trouble kind of getting their practices started because of the contact. But my son's a baseball player, and that's a little easier because they're not as much in contact, and they would spread out. They wouldn't all stay in the dugout. They would spread out down the field or stay in the bleachers in between. But for the most part, the school, again, we're in a warmer climate. We're in South Louisiana, where we're in a bigger campus where they can spread out. And the school has done an amazing job. And even if you don't agree with all the things that our schools and our teachers and our administrators have done, we have to really give a shout out to handling this unprecedented year in the best way that they thought they could. And I think they always had the interests of our kids in mind. So that's where school wise, they're back. I've looked at the school calendar for next year, and the dances are back on the calendar. The football games are back on the calendar. I think we're getting a little closer. Vaccinations, like Meredith said, are making a big difference. And, hopefully we're on the upside of of getting back to some sense of normal. But they're still all in masks, and kids are doing a really, really good job. We took a baseball coach home a couple weeks ago from a game, and he said there was not one documented case of COVID that happened from contracting it from someone at school. It's 1,400 kids that go to this school.
Wow.
It's pretty amazing to me. Yeah. I mean, they got it from, their social gatherings, or they got it from their parents or whatever, but not from someone at school. And that's a testament to all the people who work so hard.
Shout out to the teachers, man. Shout out to the teachers. Whew.
They rock.
Oh my gosh. They wore halos this year.
And the students too. I think for my kids, my son especially, it's a little difficult learning online as opposed to being in the room and sort of hands-on, more concrete kind of thing. So they've really adapted, the kids as well.
I'll tell you who I'm most concerned about is our college students. They are, thrown into a world they're still young, 18, 19, 20, and they're not around supervision. They don't have that social aspect. And I've seen, at least for my son, who's a junior at LSU, and some of his friends, and that's been really, really rough because they don't have that interaction with teachers, like where it's just so big, universities, thousands of students, and campus ministry can't do the things that they want to do. But I think it's been really tough on them.
One of the things that you talked about in your presentation last year was that when thinking about balancing music ministry and motherhood, it was, if needed, especially to think simply. I think the one example that Lorraine gave, I can think off the top of my head, was how many times have you sung Bob Moore's Taste and See? Was the one I think that you had said, like, we don't need to rehearse it if you've already rehearsed it a million times. Think simply. And I just feel like that really resonates as we start to transition back into a normal life, whatever the new normal is, or whatever our new normalcy will be. Is that a piece of advice that we as women, and you both as mothers, would be good to reflect upon? I mean, do you think there's room to leave some of it more simple and strip back in our lives?
I do. And I think that this is a time where we have to really ask the question, what do we not need to go back to? This is an opportunity to find a reset button, do things a little differently. And I was talking to Meredith last week. We were kind of chatting about this interview. And I remember after Hurricane Katrina, and there was a lot of blighted property that was very infested with crime, and it was very dangerous. And those properties were demolished. And we said, okay, let's rebuild something good for the community. Let's make it let's do something different with our schools. In the same way, I think that this is a time for us to look at what we were doing before and say, what has the biggest impact on the liturgy, on the spirituality of our congregations, on our salvation, and what doesn't? And so it's to just look at each of those things. And my pastor and I have been in conversation about, how we want to come back and what do we want that to look like. And let's not pass up that opportunity right now.
Yeah, I think we all define simple a little differently. So I keep reiterating the phrase to myself and to those around me, just because of the collective grief that our society as a whole has kind of gone through, um, the collective rage that our society has gone through. I think it's just really important that we be gentle with ourselves. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's simple. And I think that brings it back to simplicity. And so if I'm being gentle with myself, what does that what does that exude um, out of me? And by keeping things simple, I think I think one of the things that we talked about last year was like how important a schedule is for kids. And it's pretty simple to get a schedule together. It might not be simple to keep it, but if you can kind of get into that kind of routine, because we're not going back to normal, whatever that was. It's a new normal, and we can make it what it is we want. So I think it is important to think simply, but also to be gentle with ourselves and for those around us.
Mm-hmm. One of the other things that really impacted me last year from your presentation was how you reminded us as women. Now, I mean, I don't have any children yet, but as mothers, you reminded the mothers who were listening that the way that we interact with our parish and the way that we exude joy or not joy from our ministry is it projects on the perception of what our children experience and perceive the church to be. In Lorraine, your example, actually, you and your husband were rebuilding after Katrina, and you were so tied up, and you had so much on your mind, and it was so much stress, and it kind of bogged down what your sons were experiencing from the church as a result. And that really stuck with me, because I have to admit, I mean, whenever I think of ministering this year, joy is part of it, but there's been so much struggle. I mean, with furloughs of our music ministers and the limit of what we can do, and our budgets being $0 in a lot of cases, not all, but many, reduced. How important is it for us to remind ourselves and our children and our ministers about why we do this in the first place, the joy?
Yeah. And, Meredith talked about earlier when we were putting this together last summer, how we never really thought about some of the things that we've done and what we do. And it was fun to think about how this worked and how it didn't work. And just yesterday, like my husband and I took like a 2-mile walk. We have a beautiful city park around here. We walked and we were kind of talking through, because I have some decisions to make about our music ministry and what that's going to look like, and a recommendation. And he said to me, and this was, it was nice to have a friend that you can talk this through with, is, what's really working now? Let's not mess that up. And what's not working, what didn't work, let's not go back to that. And sometimes, it's easier said than done, because for me to simplify might mean saying, okay, we're not going to have we're not going to have this year. And you have to tell that person, you can't participate this year because I can't make that happen. I can't have multiple musicians. So for example, for the Easter Triduum, of course, we're spaced. We have very few musicians, but we do have a few, and we space it out so that we're safe. But I said, if I can just have just a cello and a piano on Good Friday, how impactful would that be? We don't normally have a cello, but if I could add just a cello that day, that would have as much of an impact as a string section or a full choir. But we had, two singers, piano, guitar, and a cello. And it was the most beautiful Good Friday we've had in years, because it was, nobody was focused on the music section. We were just focused on what was happening that day, in that liturgy. So those kinds of things. But then I had to tell, a choir knew that they were not singing that day too. So to make those decisions is not easy, but if we're staying in prayer and are truly discerning and hearing the voice of God in those decisions, then we have to trust that that God will have our back when we, you know, go forward with the decisions that we feel like Spirit is prompting us to make.
Any more thoughts from you on that, Meredith?
A couple of things. I think joy, it's such a powerful word. I try to live from that space. And I often am having conversations with my daughter, not so much my son. Like girls and boys are really different. I mean, Lorraine, you don't have any girls, but boy. Anyway, but I find myself saying to her, you're in control, of how you can change your lens, and you can look at it from a lens of this is bothersome and I don't like this, or you can put a lens of joy on and look through that lens. And I always say, in all situations, try to find the grace, because it's always there. And just listening to Lorraine and making decisions and stuff about as our role of mothers, but also as ministers, it was hard for me at Christmas and Easter here, because I had a huge music program. I have a choir of about 35 people at times. I have paid section leaders. I have organists, because we used to have 8 masses on a weekend. So now not only do we have to think about the people who are in our pews, or who were in our pews and who are coming back, but we have a whole nother community that's watching us online from all over the world, all over the country, all over the world. And so when I was planning those things, I didn't want, where everybody's budget is tight. But we also have a responsibility to give people the best that we can of liturgy. So I was able, gratefully, to do that both at Christmas and Easter. So when I'm thinking about simple, it really wasn't that simple. But at that point, it didn't matter, because what mattered is that people were being ministered to the best that we can bring out of here, and that's what was able to happen. I mean, I think our Easter vigil is close to about 3,000 views just on Facebook. People who,
Wow.
so I got an email the next day from somebody from Italy who's been watching all the, incessantly. Like, she's like, I watch everything that you're doing. It's just made such a huge impact in my life. She came here like when she was here in 2012. And she took a picture of all the worship aids from 2012 that she had. It was really beautiful. So you just don't know now at this point, especially with live stream, which here it'll never go away, who you're touching. And I think it's, as ministers, it's just important to remember that we're vessels, and we have to kind of open ourselves up for that joy and love to kind of come through, and try to do that, just in mothering as well. Even sometimes the ministry gets in the way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I just, one more thought about the presentation you gave last year, and this is just an anecdote. I really loved your anecdote that you shared, especially you, Meredith, where you said that you at times would bring both of your kids with you to church,
Yes.
and I so understand this. I don't know if you both know this, but my mother is also a music minister, and I grew up sitting on her bench, turning her pages for her
Wow,
music.
that's awesome.
Yeah. So I think as we move forward, I think we need, it's such an important moment to remind ourselves that our kids are still watching, that children are still so much the life and the future of the church, both home church and actual building church. I think as we shift into a hybrid way of ministering, a new way of ministering, I still think that there's going to be a lot of opportunities for children to continue to be ministered to and ministered with, so that they can be a part of the conversation. That's at least my hope.
We did that at for the Triduum. We sent out packets to all of our members that gave like little things to do at home, like fabric, little prayers, like how to, like what some things would mean, or wash each other's feet at home. So to be inclusive with kids and parents and whoever was watching. Again, that broad hybrid kind of sense of thinking.
Absolutely. So In my last couple of questions, I have to ask, of course. So, you both will be presenting at this year's NPM convention in New Orleans. Lorraine,
Yay.
yay.
Please come.
And you both will be presenting Balancing Music Ministry and Motherhood, Part 2. So, what can we expect?
I think the most important thing is that you didn't have to be at part one to be at part
Right.
two.
Right.
And we talked the other day about thinking about things that we did last year and how we can pull some things out of that, but also, we aren't where we were last year, and we've had to think more creatively and kind of manipulate ourselves in different ways to continue to be mothers and ministers. So
Yeah. And I think what this session is going to be, because we're going to be in person, it's going to be so nice to have the participants interacting with one another, storytelling, faith sharing, journaling, music. We'll probably recap a little bit about what we did last year, but like Meredith said, you don't have to have gone to last year's. But it's going to be fun for us because we're going to be able to see people who are there.
yeah.
Although I have to say, and Meredith could probably attest to this too, after the session last year, I mean, our emails were blowing up with people with sharing their stories, asking for more information, talking to us more about what we, touching a little bit about their personal stories. So that was beautiful. But this is going to be, I think, more interactive, and we are really looking forward to seeing our sisters there.
Yeah, we will do that.
That's great. As we wrap up, and until the next time we talk, which of course will be at the convention, do you have any more final thoughts? Anything else you want to make sure that we talk about, Meredith?
Well, thank you. Thanks NPM for having us on to talk about this. And I know you said this will air for Mother's Day. So, for the women who are listening, you're doing a great job. Keep doing what you're doing, and trust that you're doing what God wants you to do.
And I would say, we need to be praying for one another. We need to be praying for people that want to come to this convention and can't, people who are still not able to sing in their churches and really miss it, those who are back and for looking for creative ways, all of those planning this convention, that it can be what our people need to be creative and to share ideas. And one of my favorite things about NPM is the networking that happens and people sharing their stories about how they are being creative at the lunch table, as we're at lunch, and then we're so that's going to be a huge benefit, I think, to this conference. But I think we've just got to keep each other lifted up in prayer and just be the voice of unity and a voice of listening and not division, and let this just be a beautiful, prayerful, unifying experience. So, and happy Mother's Day to everyone.
That's right. Happy Mother's Day, Lorraine and Meredith. I hope you both have a wonderful Mother's Day celebration and continue to stay safe. And we will see you in New Orleans.
Yes, thanks so much.
Thanks.